There are so many conversations that we all know we need to have, but it's so much easier just to push them off and delay them. And so we're going to talk about, number one, acknowledging that some of these financial conversations are just difficult to have. It never seems like there's the right moment to have them. So to get you started and us started, we're going to talk about what are the most important financial conversations to have. What are some questions that might be helpful to lead into a meaningful conversation regarding finances? But don't we all delay stuff that we know we need to get done, right? Should we talk about yard work?
Yeah, right. Well, a lot of these, they're difficult because they're not necessarily that the question is complex. It's just emotionally difficult. I get to live in a lot of this space because I'm a financial advisor and an estate planning attorney on a regular basis and a mergers acquisitions business attorney. So things like succession plan with a business, things like your estate plan, things like your budget, right? As you start those conversations, I think anybody can realize like there's some emotions tied there. There's some expectations tied there. There's some uncertainty of how things will unfold.
Right.
If I ring the bell, can I unring it? Can we untalk about that? So I get it, why these are hard. However, what's worse, I think, is having 3 years, 5 years, 10 years go by and realizing we've never had these conversations. They're on the list. We've just never dealt with them.
And I think a lot of times the stall is that maybe you don't feel like you have all the quote unquote right answers or all the perfect answers, or some of the topics that we're bringing up feel like the anomaly. They don't apply to me right now. I was just finishing listening to a book by John C. Maxwell that was saying the thing that's most certain is that there will be uncertainties. And so not that there has to be a perfect plan in place, not that it can't be revised or changed, because there's going to be things in life guaranteed for all of us that we can't fully anticipate. But having a plan versus no plan, right, is still a better place to start. And so we're going to talk about some common topics today, things that we often get to discuss with our clients on a regular basis. And oftentimes these conversations, they don't necessitate having a professional in the room while you address some of these topics, but sometimes it is really helpful. But we encourage all of our clients, a lot of times there's some conversations that they have, if it's a couple, between the two of them or an individual that they've thought through before they come to us. And then we kind of try to build a plan or a structure around that. So let's dive in. What are some of the most important financial questions to be asking yourself?
There's a bunch. I think the first one I would start with, which is where we start with most of our clients, is the vision of where you're headed. What are you building? Where are you headed? I mean, a lot of people, they're 6 months, 2 months ahead of their life. Say we're raising kids, or we're in retirement, or I'm running a practice, I'm running a business. It's right what's in front of them. So I think the first question that is hard is dreaming a little. Where do we want to get to? Are we part of what's the acronym? The FIRE, financially independent, retire early. I want to work till 45 or 50. And after that, I got other plans. We are out. Others, we talk folks, they say, I love what I do. I will never stop doing this. I want to do it in a different capacity. I want to have more freedom, but I will always do this. And that one choice, that one discussion, may feel very natural to some people, but talking through that with your spouse, talking through that with the important people in your life, that's a big one. So getting a little bit of a vision, I think in my mind, is the groundwork. We need to get a vision first. But then we start having some of these more difficult conversations, such as just throwing out there, life insurance. Someone says, I think I need some life insurance, but I don't know how much. It sounds expensive, and it makes me think about death and dying, and I don't like any of that. And so people push it off. They push off. A similar one in the same vein is estate planning. This is a big one that I get to deal with on the attorney side, is that people who know they need an estate plan, they've got kids, they've got real estate, they know, especially here in California, that probate will be a difficult process, and there's a lot of ambiguity, and they know they need to get an estate plan in place. But it feels expensive. It feels bottom of the priority list. And it feels like there's a conversation about death that they don't really want to have yet. So those are some difficult ones.
There's two others that I would add if we get to them today, which would be succession planning. So if you're a business owner, what does that look like when you're no longer working? Whether you're forced to stop working or whether it's a part of your retirement plan, is succession planning. And then disability. A lot of people think about life insurance, but they don't necessarily sit and take a moment to consider, what if I wasn't able to do my same profession, or there was some sort of disability impacting our home? It could be for a dependent or for themselves. themselves. Now, all these topics feel really heavy. And so no doubt to a lot of our listeners, these might be conversations that you've kicked the can down the road. It never seems like the right time around the holiday dinner table, or frankly, just around the dinner table on a regular Wednesday night. So how do we kind of start to inch towards some of these conversations in a way that can be positive and forward thinking? Jeremiah started with vision. And actually, vision really tees up a lot of these outcomes on the various topics that we've discussed. I can't tell you how often, if a financial advisor is giving you counsel just based on your investment portfolio, that in my opinion, they're getting the cart before the horse, right? I think it's so important to lay the foundation with an individual or a couple in terms of where they're headed, what their ambitions are. They could be charitably minded. They could have ambitions towards the way they want to fund their kids or their grandkids' life, or setting up a long-term legacy, or owning multiple companies. I mean, like, you name it, there's a wide variety of different outcomes. And then you build the plan to support that. And so as we start with vision, or you yourself start with vision, that's kind of a fun place to start. And I invite you, whether it's yourself, wherever you find the most creative brainstorming place. It could be having time on your own. It could be, some people are external processors, where you just want to dream a little bit. Find your playground and talk about what would you want to be true in 10 years or 5 years or 20 years down the road. And even if you don't have it fully spelled out, what are some things that you do know are most critical? And let those start by being your guiding light. If you're a couple, I would invite you to share those dreams, even if they seem, big and audacious. Just lay them out there, right? And invite your partner to be curious as well. Invite your partner to share what their vision and ideas, and some of them might directly align, or some of them might be like, oh, that was really interesting. I never knew that. So a lot of times just starting with kind of a vision conversation would be really helpful. So I'm going to start with the sailboat for Jeremiah. He always brings up having a sailboat. I'm like, I really have to learn how to sail somewhere between
That's
now
right.
and retirement. So
Right. Right. Well, even in expressing that, like, I have no desire to go on a sailboat tomorrow, right? But it's a it's a picture of a, I don't know, freedom, relaxing, whatever it may be, right? I think the part of that visioning that's so helpful, and Laura and I have done this, we've done this with clients, be comfortable to have a really messy first draft. It's okay to put something out there like a sailboat, right? I don't know exactly what this means. I'm not committed to it. I'm not saying we're going to, change everything. I don't need you to make this happen for me. I'm just saying, here's something that when I think of years down the road, this is what it comes to. And it's funny, the more that you put meat to those bones, they do shift a bit. We've talked to a lot of, for example, boat owners, and they tell us what it takes to upkeep a boat. And you're like, that's not what I was thinking at all. That didn't feel like the stereotypical thing I was thinking about. So I think in the midst of this vision conversation, allowing yourself and even your partner to have this really messy first draft, just to say, here's some ideas, here's some thoughts. I'm not committed to any of it. I'm just expressing what maybe I might feel that could be interesting.
And I would encourage our listeners not to judge your own vision or ideas or your first draft, and don't judge your partner's first draft either, right? So make it a space where it's okay to share some crazy dreams. And we've heard so many of them, and we try to just make our meeting time with clients a space to be a little bit playful, a little bit dreamy. What would it look like if I could golf every day? What would it look like as a business owner if I wasn't dependent upon to operate my business every day? And let me tell you, sometimes there's long, pregnant pauses after some of these ideas are spoken. And that's okay. It's okay to feel a little bit uncomfortable in the midst of the vision setting process. But I think this is a great place to start. And I think it naturally kind of flows into when we think about your occupation, the way that you earn income, whether it's passive or it's earned income. What does that look like for your future? And we're driving some motivation based on that vision. So what would need to be true of your work life in order to support the vision that you're kind of drafting for yourself?
I love it. And I think that the beauty of this stuff that we get to with each other and with clients is human brains are so good at solving, how do I make this happen? And I think once you've kind of figured out, hey, here's a vision, and almost rallying around it, then it goes, what would have to be true, just as you said, Laura, to really put this into place, to play golf every day? What would have to happen? Well, and then, that's when all the actual rubber meets the road. But I think a good piece of this visioning first, the reason we kind of talk about this is it puts kind of everything in perspective of whether it's a big, overwhelming conversation or just a piece of the puzzle. So for example, a lot of folks will say, I don't want to be a burden on the next generation. When I pass away, I want this to be easy for my kids. We hear that all the time. They either experience something different with their parents, or they just know from stories of friends, this can be difficult for their kids. And with that, it becomes almost the easy button to be like, well, if that's the vision, I don't want to be a burden. I want to make this very easy for the next generation. Well, then that means I need a really solid, practical estate plan. Okay, great. Let's get that done this week. So that's checked off the list. And it went from the bottom of the list, hey, someday we need to have this hard conversation about death, to saying, hey, as part of this vision we're both excited about, we just need an estate plan in place. Let's get it done this week. And then it's done. And it doesn't have to be this difficult thing. So I think the number of these conversations we want to talk through, and we encourage people to talk through, become actually a lot easier once you have that clear vision. And then it becomes more just like action items. Let's get this done. Let's get this done. And I'll pause for a moment. In the midst of these bigger conversations, there's times where couples or individuals want to just have them by themselves. They want to think through this. They want to talk through this. And it's really healthy. There's a lot of times where having a third party in the room, especially somebody who has experience in this space, can really make that conversation go smoothly and get to the end of it and get the results in a quick manner. A lot of times our team, the role is one, thinking through this stuff and prompting the conversation, making sure it comes up. But really, it's the boots on the ground to say, hey, this is what you guys are excited about doing. These are the next action steps. Great. Our team will get that done this week. That becomes, I think, a really big resource of having that support to get some of these items done.
And I think that as you move through vision, then you start to think about a plan. Again, what would need to be true in order to support that vision? And there's kind of a refining, editing process there. And then it's natural to discover some gaps, right? What might be missing in my current life? I can't tell you how often we talk with clients, and there needs to just a starting place to be greater visibility behind spending, accounts, organization, cash flow. We've recommended on other podcasts kind of a monthly meeting. It might need to be more often if it's something that you have been out of the habit of doing for quite some time, but to find alignment as partners on how you manage your money, what are you saving for, what are you planning to spend, and just the account organization and cash flow. Sometimes that is a great place to start, right? That you might identify some other gaps along the way. What would need to be true of my business so that in 5 years or 10 years, I could plan an exit? And what does that exit look like? Who are you catering to purchase your company, or what's your plan to bring in a different partner, right? And the more that you have an idea of the exit will help indicate what your strategy is in the present. And again, it doesn't mean that strategy can't shift. That some of that is the most fun work that can be had, right? And so don't be afraid that this first draft might end up completely different from your final draft. That again, just getting started is the most important piece. So as you discover gaps, that's kind of a natural part of the process. And then the next question that I would encourage our listeners to ask is, what would create risk, or what would impede my ability to accomplish that vision? And that's where having these conversations around, like you said earlier, Jeremiah, life insurance and disability insurance, what would need to be true so that my vision would be least impacted or least disrupted for myself or for my family or my children if one of these events were to happen in life.
Even like the business owner perspective on that, because a lot of succession planning is a huge question. A lot of our clients, we work with a lot of business owners, and do I want a family member to work here? Do I want to sell this to some other organization? Do I want to build up my team so they can take things over and I'll still be the owner? Those are all different paths, and there's no right or wrong for any of it. It's just what makes sense for you. And I think, Laura, to your comment, if there's clarity on what the individual wants, not just the details, but like, I want to keep working. I want to retire early. I want to do this. It gives a lot of resource then to having some of those conversations in an intentional and purposeful way. The hard part is if you don't think through this, all these conversations become, we'll get to it someday. Or, when it comes up naturally, we'll talk about it then. And it just never comes up and you never quite get to it. And then you become, in my mind, victim to the circumstances. Something happened and now you're forced into some other situation, or you weren't purposely investing in your team to build them up for that clear vision. And so they end up taking another job. And that, in the back of your mind was your succession plan. But now, because it wasn't clear, you've lost that opportunity. So
Most
that,
of the time will end up being more expensive and not your ideal outcome if you wait. I was just explaining to our kids the other day the concept of the tyranny of the urgent. And they're like, what does that mean, Mom? And, why do you use that turn of phrase? Right. And so when, you're forced to do something urgently, there's going to be, costs that you pay as a result of that. And so, again, just going back to the idea to just have a plan in place, even if there's some revisions and changes that need to happen later on.
On that comment, all the things we're talking about here are conversations that we would agree need to get started, and they need to get some action items in place. However, as Laura said a few times, these all change. Estate plans change on a regular basis. We advise people every 3 years or so to take a look at their estate plan and see, does it still make sense? And if it does, great, we'll just put it back on the shelf. If it doesn't, it's a really good moment to keep that fresh. Same with the insurance you hold, same with your succession planning. You don't want to be on again, off again, sending the family in all different directions. But there is an idea that just getting something in place is almost like a safety net. We get that safety net in place so that the worst consequences are dealt with, and family can fine tune this along the way and let things develop. One of the things I like to say in a lot of meetings is some things you decide, some things you have to discover. Is the next generation going to take over my business? Often you have to discover that, right? Are they developing a way? Is the interest there? Is the skill set there? You have to discover that a little bit. So even though you can make some plans and ideally have some really good conversations, you still have to let that develop in a natural way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you don't talk about it, right? It doesn't mean you just leave it for the future.
Yep. And I like to talk a lot about drawing clarity, right? Drawing clarity to what your vision is, what your plans are. And a lot of times these conversations, although couched in something that might feel uncomfortable, like life insurance planning or disability planning or even succession planning, right? You might feel that you're so not ready for one of those conversations, but a lot of times they can be a moment to really define what's most important to you. And so in that way, I invite the listener to try on a different mindset in that it might help offer some clarity for where you are and what's most important for you and a potential future legacy that you're building. Clear is kind for you and your family members. And the more that people know what you're up to, what's most important to you, the more that they can rally behind your vision and where you're headed and kind of jump on board. So,
yeah.
I think in a practical sense, we've talked about kind of some ideas and some conversation starters. Our first invitation to our listeners is just plan a time to start the conversation. If it's a walk with your partner, if it's some time where you get away on your own and you set a timer to take pen to paper and just brainstorm about your vision or where you're headed, even that, right? That's a great place to start. So that's kind of practical advice for everyone.
I think that extremely practical, create a vision, ask your partner to do the same. I think even asking your partner or yourself, what keeps you up at night? Even tell them, hey, I heard this video. These people were talking about hard conversations. And one of the prompts was, what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about 10 years from now? Or what do you vision for, excited about 10 years from now?
What makes your heart beat a little faster? Right? What makes you really excited when you're thinking about either participation, work, charitable giving? What are things that you feel a physical response because you get so thrilled to hear about the work being done? Those are good places to start, right? When you're trying to excavate a vision. So.
Right. And then once you've had that initial conversation, either with yourself or with a partner, I think then an appropriate thing is then to have the next step, to say, who else needs to be part of this conversation? Is it family members? Is it an advisor? Is it somebody who can help move us forward and develop this vision? And we talk a lot with our kids that a lot of these types of conversations, even, birds and bees conversations, it's not a one thing and we'll never talk about it again, right? It's the beginning of a healthy dialogue back and forth about these topics. And so I think with your partner, with yourself, you do one visioning. It's not that, hey, we did it, we're done, but to say, hey, this is just the start of a conversation. This is now a fair topic that we can talk about and we can progress and we can develop over time. But I think that next question of who else do we need to bring into this conversation to really make some headway? And it could be an advisor, it could be another family member. But the key part is getting started.
Absolutely, to execute on your vision. Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to some of our listeners. Thanks so much for tuning in. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.